Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Something Something with Eric Newman. This is Eric Newman coming to you from the world-famous Comedy Cellar studio here in Greenwich Village, Manhattan. I want to talk about age gaps today. It's something I personally experience a lot of. Again, I try to speak very honestly here. I don't want to offend anyone, but unfortunately it's impossible when telling the truth or what I believe to be the truth. Personally, I was in a very long-term relationship. We broke up in 2020. I refer to her very often as my XX or ex because my other big ex is my almost fiance. So my ex and I broke up after an 8-year relationship in 2020, and we are the same age. And there was a part of me right after we broke up that very, very firmly believed that that was going to be the last person I dated my age. And so far, I'm right. It just felt that way. I don't know. I can't really describe it. I just felt like I was going to just date younger. And there is a sadness to that, by the way. And I know it's my choice, but there is a beautiful thing about meeting someone at a very young age, like in school, middle school or high school. So often I do shows and in the front row, I'll start talking to a couple who met when they were in 9th grade and they've been together the entire time. And there is something really beautiful about that. And also, just from a connectivity standpoint, the songs that came out when you were the same age together in school, the movies that came out, the cultural impactful moments that you both experienced together at the same age is just a very powerful thing. Just that reference point alone, I think, oh my God, remember when we were in the summer of 8th grade when Nelly Houghton here came out, or remember when we were in 9th grade when September 11th happened. Like, those are things that I can only share with the people that are my age. And so that's something that's truly beautiful about dating someone your age, your grade, and sort of just growing up with them and experiencing all the big events in life together at the same age. And something that once I got out of my relationship in 2020 with my ex, I kind of just mourned a little bit. Just the idea that, and that's not to say that I definitely wasn't going to or still am not going to, date somebody my age, but it feels just unlikely given the fact that I don't want to. So there's that. When I first got out of that relationship, and I was single, I started to realize that I was at a different phase in my life that I'd ever been. I started to make some money. I started to be more responsible, and I started to figure out who I am a little more. And all of a sudden, I was getting attention and opportunities from younger women that never would have looked at me when I was their age. So that was a big part of it. All of a sudden, I had girls who were 24 interested in me. And when I was 24, I could not land a beautiful 24-year-old girl. It felt nearly impossible. And so let me also start by saying that I think men on average are 5 to 10 years emotionally behind women. Look, it's all individual, dependent. But I think in a large portion of cases, men are at least 5 to 10 years behind women emotionally. I think that women mature a lot faster, and I think there's a lot of studies that prove that in every conceivable way, men are just behind. And ladies, I don't want you to feel offended by that, because I've met a lot of you who are extremely immature also. I don't want to pick favorites here. You guys have a lot of shortcomings in that area as well. But we all know that, men mature slower than women do. So on average, a 25-year-old woman is infinitely emotionally and mentally ahead of a 25-year-old guy. Over the last few years, I've pretty much been dating somewhere in the range of 10 to 12 years younger than me. And from a very logical standpoint, there's a bunch of reasons why. Firstly, the obvious ones, which a lot of people call me out on. Some of it is not wanting me to commit right away, not feeling as much pressure from someone who's 10 to 12 years younger than me. In most cases, when you're a man who's 35 and you're dating a woman who's 25, you will oftentimes receive less pressure and create less pressure within yourself than if you were dating someone your own age. That's not to say that every single woman at 35 is wanting to immediately have a child, because as we know now, there's a lot of women who don't want children. But I would still say that the vast majority do, and I think that age for a woman, I think gets a little harder. And so inherently, if you're going to be dating someone who feels more pressure themselves, to find the right person, if you start dating them, you take on some of that pressure. By dating a woman who's 25, there's just not as much of that. And then I've also heard women criticize me and say, oh, I think it's more because a woman your age can sniff through all your bullshit, so you feel threatened by her, and you end up dating somebody younger who hasn't figured out all your bullshit yet. And I say to that, hell yeah. No, I'm kidding. It's not that, because I never really hide my bullshit. When I start dating someone who's younger, I still, I'm pretty honest about who I am, who I've been. I'm very open early on. I try to be honest as possible. So my whole philosophy is like, I'm open to this being serious if we connect really well, but let's see where it goes. I can't make any promises. I always pushed very strongly back against that philosophy of sort of guys being full of shit and just using words to like woo women and make them think they're going to commit to them and give them everything, and then once they sort of have them, go back on all that. I don't subscribe to that philosophy. When I meet someone, I say, hey, look, I'm open, but I have to get to know you, and we have to take this day by day. I mean, that's all I can give. But a woman at 35, particularly who wants kids, probably doesn't want to take a casual approach to a relationship as frequently as a woman 10 years younger. There's just less wiggle room, I think. But I'm also kind of tired of this notion that 35-year-old women have figured it all out and know who they are and know what they want, and 25-year-old women are young and confused and naive and don't know anything about the world or themselves or what they want or who they are. Like, I haven't found that to be the case at all, and I think it really depends more on how much work the person has chosen to do on themselves or not do on themselves. Listen, don't get me wrong. On average, is a 35-year-old woman probably more mature than a 25-year-old woman? Sure, but I have friends of mine who are 10 years older than me who date 35-year-old women or in that range constantly. And they have a lot of shit to say also. It's not just like you're a woman who's 35 and you know everything. It's like we're people. Like, it depends on the person. And by the way, because like a woman who's my age is more mature or knows more about herself or understands life to a deeper level because of her experiences that she's had that the 25-year-old may not have had, doesn't mean she's necessarily easier to get along in a relationship with. Particularly right now in time, like the longer people go single in general or not married, the more they tend to cement this list of things they need and won't be as flexible about. Where I do feel like someone who's a little less experienced dating-wise or younger may have a little more flexibility or may be more open to different things. It's like we don't get more flexible as we get older. So there's also that. I would say the average age that I've been involved with in the last 4 to 5 years has probably been around 25, 26. That's the average age. Look, I do run into problems sometimes too. I mean, there are times where we'll get into a conflict and, she'll have a reaction and it's very obvious to me, okay, like this is the reaction of someone not so experienced on the younger side who just didn't know how to handle this situation better than she does currently. And so that's potentially a younger person thing. And in 5 years, maybe she would have handled it differently or whatever. But like when my almost fiance and I broke up, I kept thinking, and everyone kept telling me, oh, if she was 5 years older, she would have handled things differently. And I do believe that. But that's really only if she wants to change. Like, if she looks back, I don't know where she is now. We don't talk. But if she's looking back at our relationship and our breakup over 2 years ago now, and she goes, I wouldn't have changed a thing, then it really wasn't her age, as much as it was her stubbornness and unwillingness to grow or improve, which can exist at any age and also can exist more powerfully at a more advanced age. Like I talked about how people get less flexible and more hardened over time. Your stubbornness and unwillingness to change or get better can become stronger with age. So I just don't buy into this whole thing of women in their 30s and 40s have figured it all out, and women in their 20s don't know anything, and they're just just blowing in the wind. I just don't think that's true. I've had very meaningful, productive, great relationships with women who are 25 years old when I was 35 or 36. The person I'm dating now is a lot younger than me. So it's like, I don't necessarily think that as a woman, you're infinitely smarter and better 10 years down the road. I mean, clearly, we all get a little better with age and experience, but there's downsides to that also. There's upsides to dating me now versus when I was 28, but there's definitely downsides too. Like, I'm less flexible than I was, 10 years ago. So it's probably from the woman's perspective, a woman who's dating me now versus then, she'd probably tell you that I'm more difficult in ways also because I'm much more firm about my values and how I need to be treated and whatever. So there's always an upside and downside to aging. But one of the things is, and John just brought this up, one of the big changes in my life personally when I'm dating, it's like what I've realized is when I was 23 and I was talking to a 23-year-old, I mean, this girl would be able to, I mean, she was running me in circles, right? I mean, she was literally running me in circles because a lot of that as a man, especially when you're a guy like right out of college or whatever, like you want to get the girl so badly. And the girl knows that. And she knows that she has so much more value in your life than you have in hers. So then she ends up playing a ton of games and just, you're running around in circles trying to figure out how to appease her or whatever. And you don't realize until you get a little older that just the idea that you needed or wanted to appease her so badly was the issue to begin with. So I think just from a communication standpoint of being a young man who doesn't have the confidence in himself yet to sort of to declare, what he wants and what he'll tolerate and not tolerate, and to actually follow through with communicating when something, a girl he was talking to makes him feel uncomfortable or makes him feel like he's being disrespected, to be able to communicate that takes a long time for guys to build because truly we're so obsessed with just having sex and getting the girl to want us that we'll just tolerate, so much, so much that we don't want to tolerate simply because we don't have the balls to do anything about it. I think, for example, now, like, I have seen that when I've, started talking to like a 25-year-old or a 26-year-old, she tries to sort of play a lot of those same games or tries to make those same moves that a lot of girls in my past have tried. And instead of it working or driving me crazy, I just either, try to communicate that I don't like it and go from there, or just don't tolerate it and don't get myself involved any further with this person. And that's also, for a guy, a skill that needs to be worked on repeatedly to even get to the point that you're behaving that way or sticking up for yourself. Respect is everything. What I want to communicate is that women are just 10 steps ahead. I mean, almost if you're going to give dating advice to a young guy, like out of college, it's almost like, Try to pretend who you would be 5 to 10 years from now. But the thing is, there is no real pretending that. You actually have to live through that and become that. That's why I think, and this sort of is a little bit of a callback to, I think, the first couple episodes is like, you can't, the best game is not having game. The best game is not playing game. That even when you're a 25-year-old guy and you're trying to talk to a 25-year-old girl and you have an older guy giving you advice, like I did with Terry. Terry was only a year or two older than me, but he would often give advice and be like, don't respond back now, respond back tomorrow morning, or, things like that, where they try to guide you through and make you not look desperate as a man or whatever. But all of that was me just faking it. It was just me using advice from someone I trusted to try to lure a girl that I like into my life. But that's not authentic. Authenticity is saying, no, this is how I am, this is what I want, and this is what I expect from somebody I'm talking to. And that type of code only grows and gets solidified as you keep getting older as a man and more experienced. Another downside, though, to dating younger, and this is sort of a challenge I've had to work through with a lot of the women I've been involved with, is a lot of them, especially if they are moving here from somewhere else, when they move to New York City, like, they want to go out. They really want to go out, and they're still in that, like, going out with their friends mode. I have no desire at all to go out, get wasted, and stay out all night anymore. I mean, really no desire. I can't even tell you. And a lot of girls in their mid-20s are still in that phase. My almost fiance wasn't, though. She wasn't at all. I loved it. I met her. But she tricked me, because I met her and she was like, I'm 25 and I'm done partying. And I'm like, jackpot. But I didn't realize I was going to literally be her hospice nurse. She was just like straight up an old lady. Like, I used to have a joke where I was like, the only time we were out past 10 p.m. is when we were at urgent care. That was very true. And then when she got sick, forget it, man. I remember one time she was sick. She had the flu, and I came to her apartment. I cleaned her floors, I did her laundry, and I made her food. And I also had the flu, by the way. So I just became this woman's caretaker. And then the other girl I dated, who was 25 pretty recently, she was in AA. And I was like, great, we're not going out drinking. I had a joke about that, though. The girl I was dating who was in AA, I really liked her. She was great. She eased me into the AA thing very slowly. Like, I remember, like, on our second date, she was like, I just want to let you know I don't like going out at night and drinking at bars. And I was like, me neither. And she's like, I'm in AA. I was like, oh, I'm just tired. I relate most to young girls when they're in AA, because they like to sit and talk about their lives and then go eat at a diner with their friends after. And that's basically what my friends and I do it in their 30s and 40s now. So, it felt very, very on brand for my life at this point. But, overall, it just feels like it's less pressure for me when I'm dating younger. And so I also want to point out how I did have a brief stint where I was, when I was in my mid-20s, where I started dating. The advantage also is like 25-year-old girls, when you're 25, you can find a love connection, and you could obviously, like a lot of people date their own age. But I think a lot of times 25-year-olds are looking for very mature guys, because they've sort of hit that point of their life where they're like in their stride of figuring it out, or starting to figure out what they want. So I think, like, ultimately, they would probably benefit more from someone a little bit older than them, not necessarily a huge gap like I have a lot of the time, but at least a few years older. And guys, they, like, I had a short stint where I was involved with a 38-year-old, and then I was involved with a 41-year-old. And when I was in my mid-20s, and that's a whole different experience, because, a lot of times when a woman's that age, she does have a greater sense of self, and I think she's flattered that someone who's much younger is really into her. So and then she has money, and it's a different situation. Although I will say, man, when I was 25, I got involved with a 38-year-old who was very, very, very wealthy, and I was struggling so hard working as a waiter, trying to sort of just pay rent. And every time we went out, I still had to pay for everything. I still was the one. She wanted that experience of having a guy take her out, and she wasn't giving me any real, leeway for being younger and less wealthy. It was still expected. Does it reflect on the experience, right? Regardless of my age and my income level and her more advanced age and her way more advanced income level, she still wanted the experience of getting taken out and being wooed and having a guy provide. And it didn't really matter what the financial realities of our lives were, which I found very interesting because when I started hooking up with her, and if you've been watching all the episodes, that was the one who I had a little tiny little softy baby dick for. She, everybody was like, "Oh my God, you got your sugar mama. She's gonna take care of you." I did not have that experience. That did not happen. I was still taking her out to places that I felt were in the ballpark of what she expected in her own life. So I took her to the Mark Hotel for a $90 margarita, dude. It was like, and I was like, what the fuck? And I know that guys have had this other experience, but it wasn't a sugar mama situation. She didn't want it to be. And, there was a part of me that probably also felt like oh my God, I'm so cool. I get to take this older woman out, And she probably liked that too, just sort of the confidence that I faked. And boy, did I fake it to try to, get her into me. Very expensive confidence. Confidence not worth the money. But anyway, so yeah, no, I think that, every age gap comes with its upside and downsides and positives and negatives. But that was my experience. But I think from her perspective, she had just been divorced and she communicated to me that it was flattering that someone me who's 25 and confident and, all that stuff was very into her and very, very sexually attracted to her. So I also want to say that, let's flip-flop back to, older guy, younger woman. The one thing I will say is there's a fine line between, and this I've seen struggle in my own relationship with my almost fiance, was there's almost a fine line between being her partner, and her boyfriend and being some type of father figure. That is really dangerous, man. And I've seen it play out where there's a younger girl who's 23, 24, just out of college, and she starts dating a guy who's 35, 36. I think a lot of the guys, listen, it's very tempting and very desirable to have a woman look up to you and think you're the man. And now all of a sudden you have, some money and some stability, and they sort of admire the life you've built for yourself because, they're younger and haven't really experienced that much, especially romantically. It's a very fine line between being the boyfriend and being the father-like figure. And I just want to say that, you have to be very careful because that's not healthy. That is not a healthy dynamic where you're sort of implementing these strict rules and the much younger girl feels like she has to follow them or wants to follow them, or, if you're trying to fix her life, right? You're trying to sort of come into her life and redo things. Kind of maybe there's some things she finds disappointing about her dad, and now you kind of come in and try to rectify those things or fix issues that him and her had in the past or whatever. Losing battle 100% of the time because you kind of set this expectation in her life of being this figure that will make up for things she that went wrong in the past. And you're kind of held to that standard. And then because you're a human being who can't be perfect, whenever there's a disappointment, it's just 10 times worse because it kind of relays it back to her own, dynamic. You want to set a tone and a standard of, I'm going to be a great partner. I'm going to help you through things that you express you want help with if they're within reason, in your relationship dynamic. But I'm not here to fix your life. And oftentimes that can be sort of the underlying message of a relationship that has a big age gap like that, particularly when the man's the older one. And it might, and it could work the reverse way as well. I've never personally experienced this, but I'd imagine that if I had continued dating, that 38-year-old woman when I was 25, I could imagine that could turn into a situation where, she's just trying to fix a lot of my issues and maybe not financially because that's not the way that it was set up tonally, but whatever. Finances aside, there's a ton of value of dating somebody who's a lot older just for their level of experience. And that's almost like social wealth where, I know best because I'm older than you and I've done more than you. And I've tried to, especially post my breakup with my almost fiance, I've tried to really steer clear of that type of dynamic. Whereas, like, if I'm dating a girl who's 26 and I'm 37 and she does things or some of her actions I look at from my lens and go, okay, well, that was stupid. I try very hard not to overpower or tell or make her feel like I know best because I've been through that. And look, I've had slip ups, but ultimately I'm just very aware of the fact that people need to go through their own experiences and learn themselves. And one of the dangers of a huge age gap, it's almost impossible to fully separate that. It's hard to sort of carry this experience and this knowledge as an older person and not share it with the person who you feel is younger and less experienced, particularly at times when you feel like they need it and you really care about them. But that's where the slippery slope is. Regardless of age, it has to be an equal partnership where both people are there for one another and are helping each other to become better versions of themselves, but not in some like condescending way. And also it works in reverse. Just because you're young doesn't mean you know more about the world, the way the world is now, and I don't because I'm outdated or that's what things were like 10 years ago. I mean, like, it just has to be an equally respectful partnership. I just like youthful energy and skin, but I'm not trying to be daddy. I want to address this, like, particularly like the older women in my life will always call me out on dating younger, and they're like, Eric likes them young, and it usually makes me laugh. I usually find it like so funny, and my mom even gives me a lot of crap for it. Like I have a niece, Amelia, and my mom came over like 6 months ago, and there was like a toy in the living room, and she goes, "Is that for your niece or for the new girl you're dating?" It's like I find that to be hilarious. So when my mom does it, it's funny, and then a lot of other women in my life will do it. I mean, we can't completely ignore the fact that a lot of it is coming like when women judge or look down on guys dating much younger women. We can't ignore the fact that it can oftentimes come from a place of insecurity, right? Like, because when you shit on me or guys in general for that, it's usually because oftentimes you want to ideally live in a world where men will always want women their own age or older women because that makes women feel better about getting older themselves. If you're a woman who's 45 shitting on a guy who's 45 for dating a 30-year-old, some of it is coming from a place of your own personal insecurity for not being 30, right? I mean, we can't deny that because everybody wants to be desired. Everybody wants to feel desirable. When women are like, "You're so creepy for going 25-year-olds," in my head, I'm like, okay, but are you sure this is about me going for 25-year-olds or you being older than 25 and feeling scared that the guys you want to date will be more interested in younger girls than they are in you? Also, why is it bad if I want to date 25-year-olds? I thought people should be allowed to be attracted to and date whomever they want. I mean, love is love, right? Except love is love. Love is love. So I love 25-year-olds. Like on the guy's side. LGBTQ, it's like date whoever you want. Love is love. And then all of a sudden, it's like love is love except for straight guys who want to date a lot younger. Then love is creepy. 23-year-old women and 35-year-old women are still going for, very oftentimes the same aged men. 30-year-old men, 35-year-old men, 40-year-old men. Guys who are 23 or 25 are going for almost any woman they can get. But here's the hypocrisy. Women have always liked older men. Always. When girls at 11 years old, when I was in 6th grade and Titanic came out, they wanted Leo, right? Every girl wanted Leo, who was like 19 at the time, right? Or whatever he was. How old was he? He's around 19 when he was young. They didn't want the other like sixth grade boys. They wanted Leo. And then these teen heartthrobs like Leo or Josh Hartnett. Remember, every girl loved Josh Hartnett? Josh Hartnett was like a teenage heartthrob, dude. Every girl wanted him. And they would be like 13-year-old girls. I remember, I was 13 when Pearl Harbor came out. So it was in 2001. Every girl was like, oh my God, Josh Hartnett. And he was 22 in that movie. So it was like, it's like, that's the funniest part of the whole thing. Like when I was a freshman in high school, so many of the girls in my class were dating juniors and seniors. Same thing in college, right? You get into college, you're a freshman boy in college. Almost every girl who has a lot of options is going to choose the junior or senior because the junior or senior is stronger, taller, more mature, and can kick the shit out of the freshman boys. So what are we going to do? It's not like we can steal the girls away. Like we physically cannot compete with these guys, especially at that age when we're 18 and they're 21. We can't compete with those guys. And you can't compete with experience because they've already like dated and know better. Like, and we're kind of just desperate and like wanting any girl who shows us attention. Like, we're just like dumb, shaggy, like 18-year-old kids with no money of our own, no resources, and certainly no idea of how to make love well. No, like that's for sure. So obviously some of those relationships naturally developed. Like I know, like, there was a point in my life where I was 19 talking to a 19-year-old, but like she wasn't going to choose me over a 21-year-old who was also a good catch. If it's me, a 19-year-old Eric, versus a guy who has very similar qualities to me at 22, I'm never beating that 22-year-old out, ever. It's just how the dynamics go. So, like, do you know how many freshman girls I lost out on because they were invited to senior parties? But that's how it's always been. So guys go through rejection after rejection, assuming they even have the confidence to try, which a lot of guys don't. But I always did. So I personally would rather get rejected than not try. I had to go through rejection after rejection in my teenage years, losing out to older guys, and then spent years trying to build a career in life that I'm actually proud of and finally have enough experience to know how to actually be decently good in bed, much more than decently, but I'm trying to be modest. And I'm finally 35 and know myself pretty well and know how to be mature and communicate better. And then women go, but date your age now. No. Why can't I finally reap the benefits of dating a woman who looks up to where I am in life and actually enjoy some of that? And she's benefiting also. If she weren't benefiting, she wouldn't get involved with me to begin with. If women who were 25 didn't feel like they were benefiting by dating older men, they wouldn't. I don't believe that if you're a 34-year-old guy who's dating a 23-year-old girl, that you're like, conniving or creepy. I just think like as long as you're being respectful and handling it in a respectful way, I don't see you doing anything wrong. I really don't. And if you're attracted to women, if you're 38 years old and you're more attracted to women who are 38 years old, there's nothing wrong with that either. But you can't tell me that my preferences are wrong. Like you just can't. It's a very different level of expectation. Look, if right now I was in a place in my life where I wanted to get married and have a child tomorrow, maybe my dating preferences would be slightly different. Maybe I wouldn't want to date a 25 or 26-year-old because I would know that in most cases, she's probably focusing on her career or doesn't want to fully commit to a family. But because I'm in a place in my life where I don't want that right now, I prefer women with a bigger age gap. So yeah, I mean, it's all sort of stems from what you want, what you currently value. Where I'm going to be in 3 or 5 years, I have no idea. But sort of want to just have a deep conversation about this because I think like there's a stigma around it a little bit, and that's okay. And the other thing I wanted to point out was like if I got married to a woman right now who's my age and it's 65 because she finds a 40-year-old guy that she meets at work and who makes her feel young and alive, and she's so flattered that this much younger man finds her so desirable, I'd be the 65-year-old guy who lost my wife to the younger guy and I bet she'd be celebrated, and I bet you women around her will be like, you go, girl, still got it. I knew you still had it. And then I'm just the asshole who got left for a younger man. So it's like things sort of work in cycles, and what you want at one point of your life, you may not want at a different point of your life. But right now, where I sit here in this podcast studio as an empowered 38-year-old man who doesn't feel the need to have a family right now, I don't feel any shame for my taste, for what turns me on, what attracts me, and what I want. So I don't think you should feel that either. But guys, honestly, if you make it to your 30s, particularly mid-30s, single, trust me, go out with some younger women. I'm telling you. No matter what the older women in your life say about it, fucking experience it, baby. Because there's a closing window on that. So take advantage of it. Anyway, you guys have been amazing. Sorry I did most of the talking here, but I really appreciate you tuning in to another episode of Something Something with Eric Newman, live from the Comedy Cellar studio. Shout out to my producers, John and Zoran, who are with me here every week and keep me on track. And they're mostly responsible for anything that comes out of my mouth that doesn't sound really stupid. And so thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week. I'm Eric Newman. Peace.